Thank you so much. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. This has kind of turned into a little bit of a fireside chat, more or less. I believe there was 4 of us scheduled, but it's just me and Andre today. So, I mean, it's pretty exciting times right now for the music industry, and obviously we're not going to get too deep into the music side of things, but I think there's definitely some room for improvement from our side. Would you agree, Andre?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, very often when especially music industry panels, it usually turns into a gripe fest where people just complain about the music industry. So I'd like to, maybe talk about that a little bit, but not dwell on it too much. But my point is that the music industry has a lot of issues, and I think there's sort of finally a new wave of people that are embracing technology and trying to move it forward. And that's something that I'm very deeply excited about. And I'm excited to get into it. Yeah,
I mean, if you guys didn't know, Andre was actually the first person to release a full-length album on the Ethereum blockchain. So that's a pretty big deal. So how did that process go, man? Like, why did you decide to make that decision?
So maybe to give it some context, I had been interested in Bitcoin and blockchain for many years, but I had never really kind of done a deep dive into it. And I found myself in January 2017 just going through YouTube, looking at videos, and I stumbled upon a video of Vitalik Buterin, which is the founder of Ethereum. And I was kind of blown away by it. I was really impressed. I mean, clearly a very young, very talented person, and talking about these very big ideas of a world computer, of this concept of like shared infrastructure, and it almost like changed my life in a way. And I feel like I'll see that as a turning point in my life in a couple of years, but it opened up my eyes to a lot of things that could be fixed in the music industry using this technology. So that sent me down a rabbit hole. I tried to look up, who's even working in this space, who's even building anything, and I discovered Ujo Music, which is who I ended up releasing it through. And they're part of Consensus, which is a pretty big, probably the largest incubator, if you want to call it that, for Ethereum-based startups. And they're based in New York, and I just happened to have an album that I was going to release later that summer, so it was like perfect timing, and it kind of worked out. It ended up being the first one. I didn't really set out to do that, but happy that it went that way.
That's awesome. I mean, so how did it go though? Like, what got you so excited that you said I should put an album out through the Ethereum blockchain with Ujo? I mean, what was that decision process like? Like, what excited you? What problems did it solve?
So, Ethereum, blockchain in general, but Ethereum specifically enables transfer of value in a decentralized way. And what that means is you can exchange directly with your fans in this scenario. And if you know a little bit about the music industry, most of the industry is actually intermediaries. So this is a fantastic way to kind of get around that and interact directly with your fans. So for me, just as a proof of concept, just to show that it was possible, it seemed like a really cool idea just to kind of put it out there, see who would buy it. It's really one of the interesting properties of it is it's going to be there forever. Nobody can ever take it down. It's always going to be up there. People can, after they bought it, if they kept their wallet, they can always go back and get those files. They'll always be accessible to them. Whereas I can't say the same thing for iTunes, for example. The iTunes store is going down, so you now have to
transition
to Apple Music, and maybe that's not a big deal for most people, but it is a big deal for some.
And I think, in a way, to add on to that, I think we're losing a lot of, we're almost more centralized now, and Spotify and Apple Music has definitely become similar to what the radio was 20, 30 years ago. So what we've done now is we've created a subscription model wherein you pay $10 a month, and that gets divvied up between millions and millions of artists, which is not bad. But oftentimes, I feel like a lot of people are super fans or have a few artists, a top 5 that they really love. And I think, one of the most exciting things to me anyway, and working with artists every day, is allowing those super fans to really invest in what they love versus just kind of hoping money gets to them. And in a lot of cases, it doesn't. And I think so the superfan model I really love. And I think that, Ujo and researching blockchain has been a way to almost activate that and to get around those intermediaries where, an artist oftentimes doesn't know when they're being paid, how much they're being paid, what their music has done, and they're often left in the dark, which, to my perspective anyway, seems a little backwards considering that, the industry is built on their music. So I think blockchain is really exciting because it gives us an opportunity to create a one-to-one direct-to-consumer transaction in a controlled platform that no one, has ownership of and can't change. So, relying on something like iTunes is now gone. And that was no one's decision. No artist had a say in that. And I think that's a little backwards.
Yeah. Another thing that I learned from this whole experience, which was that we actually had more people tipping than I did sales. So I'm not really sure what that means yet because we haven't done like a follow-up release to kind of compare it to. But I feel like we stumbled on something really interesting, which is, we see it happening in Twitch and like even on YouTube, where people will tip their favorite content creators, and that's actually been, on the extreme example, Ninja, making $500,000 a month or something like that.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, obviously that's not going to happen for everybody, but but like that's all in subscriptions and tips and sponsorships, things like that, that are unrelated to the content that he's creating. So I think that was a really interesting point that I learned from this whole experience. The other thing is I probably got more press than the album itself just about Ethereum than I did about the actual album, which was kind of cool. So I have this very fond memory of being, I was in Japan promoting the album, and a lot of people don't speak English there, so I had a translator, and trying to speak to Japanese journalists trying to explain Ethereum through a translator was kind of tricky. But so it just kind of highlights that this is still very new, very early. The user experience is still not there at all. But like as a proof of concept, it works, and there's a lot of excitement around it.
I wonder what would happen. So in the situation that this landslide occurs and the music industry largely adopts, these ideas, who do you really think has to take that first plunge? Is it the artists creating a movement and bringing the power to themselves, or is it an industry partner like Spotify to adopt this and to start functioning with this?
I think it could play out a variety of ways. I kind of imagine that it'll coexist for a long period, and then, if something is substantially better than the other option, then usually the better option wins over the long term. So that's kind of how I think about it. It's probably not going to happen overnight, but
we could hope. Yeah. And there's something interesting too about the transparency of transaction as well. Especially having something on a publicly available ledger, for an artist's fans to see, in a situation that an artist signs to a major record label, and they're at, between 18 and 20% of their royalties after recouping expenses. I don't know if fans know that. I don't know if fans know that when they buy, their favorite artist's album on iTunes, that their artist is probably not seeing a lot of that. So I think that, it's really exciting to know, for example, just to give you guys a little bit of an anecdote, we're very involved. Our record label is actually a branch of a YouTube channel. And that may sound silly, but we have 10.5 million subscribers of very, very engaged consumers, seeing about 150 people a month coming through. And what we've realized is that informing fans and communicating with them on a one-to-one direct-to-consumer basis is such an exciting time to move business forward for music and just communities in general. For example, to touch on the streaming thing, we've been putting on some charity live streams wherein we stream some music on our channel for 12 hours and ask for donations to help with mental health charities. And we've raised $30,000 in 24 hours, which isn't a huge amount of money, but from just some kids watching videos on YouTube, I think it shows that engaging with someone on a one-to-one basis where they know what you're doing and they believe in what you're doing shows a lot of promise. And I think Ujo and blockchain tech in general, giving fans that ultra transparency empowers them and makes them feel valued. And I think that moves music forward. Honestly, I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, so just to touch on the streaming thing, so Spotify and a lot of these other streaming services, they're absolutely amazing from a consumer perspective. I mean, I use Spotify all the time. I love it. I get my algorithmically designed playlists, and they're mostly pretty good, and it's a great experience. But I'm certainly not the first person to say this, but the financial side of it doesn't really work right now. So, like you said, I think that we're clearly seeing clearly seeing the connection between the fan and the artist, and I think this tech specifically enables that connection in a much more direct way.
Yeah, it's true, and I mean, actually, to touch on the Spotify side, it's so fascinating to me, and from from an outside consumer perspective, I mean, how much do you need to stream to actually make a decent living on Spotify?
Well, I can put it this way. I don't know a single person that makes a living off of Spotify.
Yeah, which is interesting because considering that's the number one or actually second highly consumed music platform to YouTube, that's pretty crazy. And honestly, too, I don't know who follows the music industry news in the audience, but Spotify was recently under a $1.5 billion lawsuit for unpaid royalties. They have the money sitting in an account, but they don't know who to pay, which is fascinating. So that tells me they aren't really a tech company. They're a music company, and they're very much a music company. They can give you playlists based on what you listen to that are incredible. But do you think that blockchain could solve those lawsuit issues and that tech side that Spotify is missing?
Yeah, it's. I'm not exactly sure, what happened there. But there's actually one of the major issues that we struggle with in the music world is actually attribution and metadata. So we have all these kind of walled gardens of different sets of data. What I'm talking about is an artist's name, who wrote it, where it was recorded, that kind of basic information, like the album title, album art, things like that. That's all in these different areas, and none of them talk to each other. So I think that's one of the probably easiest examples of where I think blockchain tech, specifically Ethereum, can help with this. Mm-hmm. Is that you can build all of that, and no single party can control it, but everybody can benefit from it. Totally,
yeah. I think it's really exciting to know that. I read an interview recently about Ujo and how the platform will be built out. And it seems as if almost any collaborator on a song can kind of be paid for their part based on, the artist's decision. So if you wanted to give out stems and someone really loved the guitar part of your record, you could make sure that guitarist who played it is being paid. And I think that, we've reached a time where, a song can be made by 30 people. And it's kind of all just hoped for and predetermined that they're getting paid. But it's kind of hard to manage that. And if anyone decides to look into the back end of publishing, which is the songwriting side of the music industry, it's very convoluted and complicated with good reason. But I don't know if it's been updated or looked at, through the eyes of something like blockchain.
I know for a fact that just on a software level, that the publishing industry has been using software that was built before iTunes was even around. So
that says something.
They're not. I mean, they're coming around. I know they're trying. It's not like they're blind to it, but it's taken quite a while.
Which, I mean, that makes perfect sense then, that someone like Spotify wouldn't know who to pay on the publishing side, because if that tech is outdated, they don't know how to use it. No one's communicating with each other. So I think that, do you think something like Ujo or just blockchain tech, maybe Ethereum, could solve somewhat of the publishing problem?
I think so. I mean, it's not an easy task. That's a pretty big, daunting thing to attempt. But I think it's definitely doable because of the specific properties that Ethereum or blockchain in general bring to the table. Yeah. Data permanence. Just being able to trace a transaction or whatever, and then just being able to share infrastructure on like a very high level.
Totally, yeah, totally. I mean, and what say this happens, maybe 20 years from now, and everything's kind of in place as it should be. What does an artist's life look like? Is the industry completely restructured at that point? Do labels have to start shaking in their boots at all, or should I be scared?
I mean, I feel like labels get a bad rep.
It's true.
It's well, maybe rightly so because of a couple of bad actors, but labels for the most part are essentially partners, and they try to work with artists, and they both hopefully are trying to make a profit. I mean, that's maybe not the ultimate goal, but that is a big part of it. So I see labels as moving more towards like product management side of things, like helping get your artwork, helping get the right producer, or just help logistically putting it out, getting it, if you do a physical release, getting that in stores, like things like that. That's where I see the label side of it going. Maybe a little bit on the A&R side too. Yeah. That's obviously a big part of it. I guess just to kind of throw a question your way, how do you see what you do being disrupted? Or
it's interesting. I think because we're such a small team, a lot of our time is spent on restructuring. And I think, one takeaway from the music industry is that something you're doing right now is probably not what you're going to be doing in 3 months. And I think, for something like Universal Music Group, who has 2,000 global employees or more, when something gets disrupted, it takes a long time to kind of work its way down, and for them to communicate with each other. For us, I think my biggest priority is really just making sure an artist has everything they need to move forward. And a lot of the time it's in education almost. And artists who make amazing music sometimes don't understand how music gets to stores, what a songwriter even is, what publishing revenue is, how to get vinyl records to brick and mortar. So I think that if our priority stays as the artist's vision, then it will just adapt and adopt new tech as it comes in, I think. And I think as a major label or a huge corporation signing thousands and thousands of records a year, I think it's important to pay attention to the voice of the people who, make the music that you're benefiting from. So I think paying attention to that voice, and it's clear Spotify has invested so much time into programs like Rise, which are giving power to artists to be independent. So I think understanding that as a record label, and understanding, our background of community development, merging all of that, I think allows us to stay nimble, ideally, I would hope. I don't know if anyone had any questions at all, or if anyone had any curiosities. If not, we'll just, I see a question back there. I think there are some mics up front. I'm not sure if they're on, but would love to hear from you guys.
Hi, guys. It's interesting because everything you said, I lived it for a couple of years as former CTO of Label Engine, and essentially the same issues with attribution and rights management and royalty accounting. And it's great that you're experimenting with this technology, and I think I saw the same thing with blockchain in terms of being able to go direct between artist and consumer. And what are your thoughts on maybe the combination of the technology of the ledger and DRM or rights management? Because ultimately that's the issue here is streaming has became the consumer preference, whereas how do you associate that to the royalty and let the artist get paid? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the DRM in the sense of like a piracy protection, or?
Well, you have to deliver the media, right? You have to get the music to the listener or the video to the viewer. And YouTube, we were working on daily reconciliation of YouTube metrics to be able to show the artist exactly what they would get paid from the views that were happening with YouTube. And that's not transparency that YouTube provides easily today. So the ideal system is one where the artist gets to know that information as it's happening. Of course, I'm very familiar with Ujo as well and their approach. So
I think that Ujo's approach with this is like if you build an open system, then basically anybody can kind of tap into it, and there's not. I mean, at this point in time, there's no analytical tools available. It's pretty early for that, but there's nothing stopping you from doing that. It's very trackable. So I'm not the technical person to maybe answer this perfectly, but my understanding of it is that it's sort of like every stream or every purchase or anything, any kind of interaction with it is a license. So like a stream is sort of like a micro license, if you will. So it's like a very quick.
As an artist, what do you see as the ideal situation?
I think for me the biggest thing is really just the transparency is a big deal. I think there's a big lack of that, and just the direct connection. Like I really do feel like that's missing, even in our hyper connected internet world. It's just still not happening. So that's more where I see it going. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the interesting chat, and my question is slightly related to the previous question. I want to touch more on the piracy side. Do you see, for example, a scenario where we're all having our music in a blockchain, and let's say someone really doesn't like an artist, they buy their album and put the album for free on the blockchain, and it being a censorship resistant database, do you see this as a problem? What do you think about this problem of piracy and this kind of attack on an artist in a blockchain scenario? Do you see as a double-edged sword or something like this?
Yeah, I can say something, but go for it.
Yeah, I think we'll both take a turn. This is a big topic. There's a few things I think in that system. There's a music industry letter called the Bob Lefsetz letter, and something I read from him was that your music at this point as an artist, and correct me if I'm wrong, is very much a business card for your business, but there are so many other avenues of earning. And so music is basically free at this point in time. We can stream music for free. Thousands and thousands of songs, which I think in itself combats piracy a little bit. But now, in a blockchain situation, I think that combining with tech like something like Shazam to fingerprint music identity, that can still be essentially streamed for free, but is going through a ledger with perhaps a protected fingerprint on every asset ingested into it, with attributable rights. So say Andre wrote a song, and then that song was created a fingerprint, the composition or the master recording, and then that song was, any time it is entered into the blockchain in any iteration, those are attributed to the original fingerprint or rights holder. I think is a solution for, allowing open consumption, which we already do, but giving back to the original creators. But then also, before I talk your ear off, I think with the business card model, we've really noticed that allowing free use music on YouTube can really grow an artist profile and allow him to convert business in other ways, whether it's a subscription model similar to Patreon, where he provides fans with certain things, or live touring is clearly still the biggest earner in the industry. So I think that open consumption of music is great, and just somehow combining fingerprinting tech within the ledger could be really valuable.
Yeah, the piracy thing is actually, we could talk about this for a really long time, but I could tell you for a fact that I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for piracy, and that may sound like kind of harsh, but like I grew up in Portugal. My local record shop only had major label records. I was not interested in that stuff, so I was a very avid pirate at the time, but in a way it wasn't like, at the time it wasn't me trying to steal music or anything like that. It was just very early. I think it was more just the access that enabled. That to me was life-changing. I mean, that's when I really dove into music, and so I totally understand it from an artist perspective, because like you could categorize that as lost sales, but I don't really see it that way. I see it as just like a part of, it's just a part of life, and some people are gonna take your music for free, and that's just how it's going to be. I agree. Like if there's like some level of like fingerprinting system, or there's ways to combat that, and I think the piracy problem is not really that big of an issue at this point.
Yeah, I think just based on recent chart metrics too, it's shown itself as to be such a little problem now. I think with the introduction of streaming, when we were relying on physical sales or digital sales to make the majority of our master revenue, I can see how that would be an issue. But the majority of people right now want what's easy, and I think pirating is way too many steps versus putting on Spotify or Apple Music and being a passive listener. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more, yeah.
I have a question. I think these concepts and these theories that you're talking about are really exciting, and I'm interested to know from either of your perspective, have you seen artists be able to change the way that they're making a living, or change their what they're depending on for financial security because of directly these technologies? Have you seen it make an impact to that point where it's changed someone's day, someone's revenue, someone's year in a practical application at this point? And if so, what do you think is the biggest difference to make that happen for more people and to give more artists access to that security through this?
I would say that at this point, it's still way too early. It's definitely growing. I mean, I don't have any actual figures to throw your way, but I could say that it definitely had an impact in my life. Maybe I'm in a different situation than most, but I think at least what I was trying to achieve with that initial release was just sort of a proof of concept, and I think we're only starting to see like what's coming next, like now. So I think it's a little bit too early. I don't have any. Yeah,
I mean, I definitely don't know anyone whose lives have been changed yet. But what I do see a lot is excitement in artists and them understanding that they can actually make moves is huge. And I think, music platforms take forever. And I think in order to be successful, the blockchain tech has to incorporate itself into what exists, but then the adoption on a wide scale, which I think Andre is doing a really good job of at Ujo, is like just getting artists to be stoked on it, because not too many are yet.
I just remembered a situation. So Imogen Heap, she released the first single, I think in 2015, with Ujo, and maybe this is kind of a backwards way of doing it, but because of the price appreciation, she actually took all those funds and started, has a startup now. So maybe that's a good example, but that's kind of an outlier though.
I think we're out of time, guys. It's been such a good talk, Andre. Thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and thanks, Cambridge House.